Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. They say preparedness is paranoia with better gear. Maybe they're right. But when you've spent 20 years training for a disaster everyone else thinks will never come, pandemics, societal collapse, mass grid failure, you develop a tolerance for being mocked. I just never thought the first time I'd use all those skills would be somewhere else. My name is Elias Monroe, 41, former US Army combat medic. Now, I run a survivalist channel out of my off-grid compound in northern Colorado, about 10 miles west of Mika, up in the White River National Forest. Solar panels, a gravity-fed water system, a greenhouse that can feed 6 and 3 years worth of freeze-dried rations stored underground in a climate-controlled bunker. Most people saw a lunatic, but I built a life that could endure anything I thought was possible, until July 9th. That's when I stepped through the rift. I wasn't looking for trouble that morning. The previous night had brought a weird electrical storm, no thunder, just flashing light and a static charge that left the hairs on my arms standing upright. GPS went haywire, solar inverter glitched, and I lost satellite comms for 12 hours. Around 4 o'clock, my seismic monitor started recording minor activity. Strange, rhythmic pulses in the soil, like a mechanical heartbeat deep underground. By dawn, everything calmed. But there was a smell in the air. Ozone, scorched metal, wet granite. And then I heard it, a hum, faint, harmonic, coming from the canyon. At 0700, I packed my field gear, M81 pattern ruck with MREs, water bladder, survival tools, handheld ham radio, emergency beacon, medkit, Glock 19 with 3 mags, and a suppressed Ruger precision rifle chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. I didn't expect to need it. I was just going to check on the old mining cave near Dead Horse Gulch. The cave was real, abandoned in the 30s, sealed off by BLM after a rockfall back in 1982. I knew the terrain well. Jagged limestone cliffs, scree paths, pine thickets. I'd even installed motion cams a few years ago to track mountain lions. That morning, one of those cameras had gone dark. It took an hour to reach the cave entrance. What I found there made me stop in my tracks. The rock wall had split. Not cracked, split, cleanly, vertically, about 6 feet wide and at least 12 feet tall, running straight through the granite like someone had sliced it open with a laser. On the other side was nothing, just a wall of thick silver blue mist swirling like dry ice smoke, unnaturally cold despite the July heat. My compass spun in lazy circles. The air buzzed against my fillings. I should have turned back, but I reached out. The mist didn't resist. My hand passed through, tingling, cool, like submerging into glacier melt. When I stepped forward, I fell. Not down, through. I woke up to birdsong. The world was brighter, not just from the sun, but the sky itself. It was a deeper, richer blue. The air smelled cleaner. No airplane trails overhead, no satellite pings on my wrist receiver. I was still in the mountains, but it wasn't my White River. Trees were different, taller, older, pines I didn't recognize. Moss growing in thick green mats over black stone. The cave was gone. Behind me was a wall of rock, smooth and featureless. The rift had vanished. My first instinct was to mark the location. GPS still gave coordinates, but they didn't match any known datum. It was like the system had reset to 0. My altimeter read 8,602 feet, temperature 68 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 41%. I started walking east. By 10 o'clock, I'd descended into a wide alpine basin dotted with small ponds and deer trails. Then I saw the first man-made object. A rusted utility pole half submerged in a dry creek bed. The pole had no cables, just a faded placard that read, "Telluric Network Do Permit." I didn't know what the telluric network was, but I knew the Department of Energy hadn't operated any grid structures in this part of Colorado in my world. 2 hours later, I found the town, if you could call it that. It was once a mining settlement, log cabins, rusting tin roofs, a single old water tower that had partially collapsed, but there were signs of modern habitation, steel-reinforced doors, bullet-ridden street signs, a school bus flipped on its side with gun ports cut into the frame, and silence, not a soul around. I crept in carefully, rifle ready. The town's name had once been Red Summit, or at least that's what the peeled highway sign said. Population, unknown. What caught my attention wasn't the emptiness, it was the blood, dried, blackened, spattered on doors, drag marks in the dust, and then the writing, scrawled on the side of the water tower in white paint. Stay in the sun, burn the dead. My gut went cold. I swept the area, house by house, found a generator with a burned out alternator, rain barrels, a pantry stocked with mason jars. The people here had survived, for a time. They'd fortified, planned, but they were gone. I took what I could carry: ammunition, 9mm and .308 Win, water purification tablets, a map drawn on butcher paper showing hand-labelled locations, old hospital, tunnel mouth, quarantine field, and one circled 3 times in red, the nest. That night I camped in the schoolhouse attic. I found a journal under the floorboards. Belonged to someone named Marta Epley. She'd been a biology teacher. Her last entry, dated June 17th, read, "We tried to stop it. God help us. We burned so many. But the nest keeps spreading. The infected don't die right. They learn whatever it is. It thinks now. We have to reach the repeater tower and send the beacon. If you're reading this, don't go near the tunnels after dark." I didn't sleep much. By morning, I'd accepted the truth. I wasn't on my Earth, not a dream, not psychosis. My instruments worked, my body ached from the climb, and the radio still chirped with static. But no channel matched known handbands. My water purifier registered 0 ppms of pollutants. Even the soil samples looked different, iron content higher, more magnetite. I spent the next 3 days mapping, avoiding the tunnels, following the trail Marta had left on her map. On the 4th day, I reached the outskirts of Glenford. In my world, Glenford is a blip of a town. Here, it had been a stronghold. Sandbags, barbed wire, watchtowers, solar floodlights rigged with motion sensors, and bodies, dozens of them, burned. That's when I saw my first infected. It was standing on the edge of the woods, still, alert, like a sentry. At first I thought it was human, until I saw the way it moved. Too smooth, too steady, like something animating flesh from the inside. The skin was grey and taut, with patchy hair and open sores that didn't bleed. Its eyes weren't milky like I expected. They were bright, almost reflective. It didn't charge, didn't scream, just watched. I backed away and returned to the shadows. That night, I observed from the rooftop of an old fire station. There were dozens of them, pacing the tree lines, coordinated, shifting patrols. One of them sniffed the wind and changed course without warning. They were hunting something, or guarding it. On July 17th, I met the first survivor. Her name was Claire Cho, 36, former microbiologist at the CDC. She nearly shot me with a crossbow. I'd stumbled into one of her perimeter alarms near a collapsed pharmacy. Wire tripline, signal flare rigged to a mousetrap. Effective. I froze, hands up, and shouted I wasn't infected, that I came from over the ridge. It took hours before she believed me, not the parallel Earth part, just that I wasn't part of the nest. Claire had been surviving alone since her group fell 3 weeks earlier. She had a small shelter inside the old National Guard armory, booby-trapped 6 ways from Sunday. She explained the outbreak started 3 years ago, after a series of bioweapon experiments in Atlanta leaked during a massive solar storm. The government tried to suppress it. Quarantines, mass relocations, even tactical nuclear strikes in the Midwest. None of it worked. The infection was airborne, but only mildly contagious that way. The real danger came from exposure to infected tissue. The virus, VX7A, rewrote neural patterns, kept the brainstem active while forming synaptic bridges in the motor cortex. It made them fast, coordinated, and some, Claire said this with a hollow voice, started speaking. She wasn't crazy. She had notes, samples, microscopic slides of synaptic tissue that pulsed under light. VX7. A didn't just reanimate, it evolved. The nest wasn't a location, it was a hive mind. That night, as we sat by a red-filtered LED in the basement of the armory, she told me about the repeater tower, the last one still functional. It sat atop Eagle Peak, 70 miles southeast. If we could get there, upload Marta's vaccine data, and trigger the emergency broadcast override, other survivors, if any, might come. Claire had spent months planning the route, but never had the manpower or supplies to make the full journey alone. She was a scientist, not a soldier, and while she'd adapted better than most to the collapse, setting traps, rationing antibiotics, repairing radio equipment with salvaged parts, she didn't carry the weight of long marches or active patrol. When I told her about my background, she looked at me with quiet calculation, not awe. She didn't believe in heroes anymore, just usefulness. We started laying out the maps she had, tattered USGS topo charts, laminated under cracked plastic film. She'd marked the danger zones in red, collapsed highways, known infected congregations, old refugee camps that had turned into slaughterhouses. In blue were the few places she believed were still safe or worth investigating. An old ranger station north of Flat Top, a hydro station near Beaufort, and a radio relay post on Mount Werner that might still carry a signal if the solar array hadn't failed. There was a dark green line traced southeast, her intended path to Eagle Peak. We'd need fuel, not for vehicles, we wouldn't risk the noise, but for the solar batteries, water pasteurizer, and emergency burner stove. Her stores would last us 10 days if we rationed tightly. I brought what I could from my own cache, stashed outside the town. Backup optics, spare weapon parts, a few solar-charged radios, and a durable old Spectra water filter I'd packed as a last resort. She had ammunition, mostly. 22 LR, 9mm, and a single old bolt-action Remington chambered in .308 that had belonged to her father. We slept in shifts that night, the silence between us filled with unspoken questions. I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said, that the rift I'd found might not be unique, that others had opened, here, and maybe even back in my world. If the infected came through, if something worse came through, it wouldn't stop at one world. By morning, we were packed and ready to move. We left at 5:40, just before first light, when the mist clung low to the ground and the infected were least active. Claire wore a surplus plate carrier with soft armor inserts, her crossbow strapped tight to her back, and carried a modified AR-style pistol with a short barrel and folding brace, her only concession to modern firepower. I carried my rifle slung and the Glock holstered, my chest rig fully stocked with mags, tools, and first-line gear. We travelled light, no tent, no stove, just tarps, ponchos, water kits, and enough high-calorie rations to keep us moving. The first 3 days were uneventful, which was almost worse than danger. The quiet was unnatural. We moved through the low hills beyond Glenford, past skeletal remains of cabins long stripped for firewood or barricades. We found no bodies, no signs of struggle, just absence. It wasn't until the 4th day, when we reached the remains of County Route 8, that we saw what had become of one of the refugee convoys. Dozens of burned-out vehicles clogged the narrow road, some overturned, others driven into shallow ditches. Old tarps fluttered in the breeze, shredded and sun-bleached, tied between skeletal truck frames and trees, like someone had tried building a makeshift barricade. Bullet holes pockmarked nearly every surface. The ground was littered with scattered personal effects, baby shoes, cooking utensils, a dog collar with no dog. The stench was long gone, but the unease hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had never really gone out. We searched cautiously, wary of traps or movement. I took point while Claire covered our flank, a crossbow cocked and loaded. It wasn't until I stepped inside the hollowed shell of a tour bus that I saw the writing on the walls. "We were sick. We left the clean on the hill. Do not trust them." The words were smeared in something dark, painted with fingers or palms, and over them was a red circle with a slash through a crude drawing of a human face. No eyes. Just an open, screaming mouth. We didn't linger. The map said the nearest high ground was Whetstone Ridge, and we made for it quickly. That night, just before sundown, Claire spotted the smoke. A thin grey column to the southwest, rising behind a jagged ridgeline. Controlled, steady, not wildfire, not a cooking fire either. Someone was burning waste. Against our better judgment, we approached. It took most of the night to circle around without being seen. We stayed low, following game trails, listening for movement. Around 0200, we reached a small clearing overlooking an old ranger cabin. Solar lanterns glowed faintly from inside, and a shortwave antenna rose from the back of the roof, reinforced with wire stays and salvaged tubing. There were 2 people inside, armed, awake. Claire recognized one of them, an ex-park ranger named George Belling, who had survived the fall of Eagle Nest Station and had last been seen traveling with a convoy out of Carbondale. She thought he died a year ago. We approached at dawn, hands up, no weapons drawn. George didn't shoot us. That was the first miracle. George was leaner than Claire remembered, with deep creases in his face and a left arm that hung limp from an old fracture. He let us inside, but made it clear we wouldn't be staying long. The woman with him, Anna Diaz, was ex-military. Special tactics from what I could tell, though she didn't talk much. She watched us constantly, especially me, and never took her hand off the grip of her sidearm. They had a small garden, rain collection drums, a manually operated wind generator they'd scavenged from a weather station. George had been trying to rig a signal booster to the repeater tower ahead, but lacked the final encryption key. That's what Marta's data held. Not just vaccine logs, but the last software key needed to reinitialize the emergency broadcast system that could override surviving repeaters still running on solar backup. George gave us a choice: stay the night and help him finish prepping a radio test in the morning, or move on and risk getting caught in the open if the infected surged again. We stayed. That night, he told us what happened to Eagle Peak. It wasn't the infected that brought it down, it was people. A group calling themselves the Thresholders had occupied the mountain 2 months prior. Former military, contractors, survivalists turned zealots. They believed the infection was divine purification, nature taking back control. They'd found a way to communicate with the nest, George claimed, using modulated light pulses and sound frequencies. They didn't fear the infected anymore. They fed them. Claire didn't want to believe it. I didn't either, but George showed us proof, an old body cam he'd scavenged from a downed drone team. The footage was corrupted, but the last clear frame showed a tall man in desert fatigues standing in front of a strobing red light, surrounded by infected. They didn't attack. They stood still, then knelt. He said Eagle Peak was now their temple. We left the next morning. Anna chose to join us. She didn't say why, but I saw the way she scanned the horizon as we departed. She was done hiding. Claire didn't like it. Anna wasn't exactly warm, but I knew better than to turn down someone who could handle herself in a firefight. The next leg of the journey took us through the Tanglewood Lowlands, a swampy forest basin that had once been a wildlife preserve, but had since turned into a maze of broken boardwalks and flooded trails. The infected avoided it during the day, but at night, the swamp came alive with their calls, short bursts of clicking, throatless groans, and sometimes faint whimpers designed to lure. They mimicked human distress calls. We moved fast, taking shelter inside an old trail center raised on stilts. Anna took first watch, Claire second. I slept through most of it until I woke to the sound of tapping glass. The infected had found us, 4 of them, standing in the floodwater, neck deep, unmoving. They stared through the windows, tilting their heads slowly from side to side, pressing hands against the glass. One of them wore the remains of a rescue jacket. Another had a splint on its leg, but their eyes gleamed, alert, curious. They didn't break in. They watched us until dawn, then disappeared into the trees. By the 12th day, we had reached the final ridge before Eagle Peak. The tower was visible now, tall, skeletal, jutting from the summit like a blade against the sky. We camped in an old forest overlook cabin, silent, going over the plan again and again. Claire would carry the data module. Anna would set up Overwatch on the southern slope. I'd go with Claire to the base station and trigger the relay. We rested that evening in rotation, taking turns watching the ridgeline and scanning the valley below through high-powered optics. Eagle Peak had once been the site of a mountain lookout station and later a Cold War communications hub, built high and hardened. The repeater tower was constructed in the 1970s and refurbished after September 11th for federal interoperability. Even on this parallel Earth, the infrastructure was similar enough for me to recognize the standard layout: a main access road leading to a reinforced gate, a relay hut at the base, and a secondary entrance on the north slope leading to an underground maintenance tunnel. Claire had hoped that tunnel would be our key in. But something was wrong. Through the spotting scope, we saw movement around the main building, not just scavengers or wildlife, disciplined human movement. 2 figures patrolling opposite arcs with rifles and radios, pacing with regularity, not hasty, not hungry, trained. They weren't survivors looking for food. They were defending something. The thresholders had entrenched themselves. Anna confirmed at least 6 individuals on patrol and 1 rooftop sentry on the southern face of the structure. She couldn't make out their loadouts completely, but noted presence of NVGs, suppressed carbines, likely 5.56 or 300 BLK, and hard armor. That meant they were ex-military or private contractors, possibly both, the kind of people who brought doctrine with them into the apocalypse. We debated extraction versus infiltration. Claire insisted the repeater tower was our only hope. Without it, the encrypted data she carried would remain locked in her field drive, and no other node on the continent still had the clearance level needed to override the broadcast systems. Anna was cautious, but not unwilling. She'd faced operators before. She understood the stakes. So we planned a midnight approach. Anna would move ahead before dusk and establish a sniper perch on a rock outcrop called Hammer's Point. From there, she had 300 meters of clear view down to the north tunnel entrance. Claire and I would wait until 1:15, then slip down the gully under cloud cover. If Anna took the first shot, it meant we'd been seen. If she didn't, we'd proceed. That night it rained. Light, cold, steady, perfect cover. We began our descent as the forest whispered around us, pine needles slick underfoot, boots sinking into dark loam. Claire stayed close, eyes sharp beneath her hood. She was focused but tense, one hand gripping the data pouch strapped to her chest. I led, rifle angled low, flashlight lens painted red and kept covered. We moved slowly through the gully, keeping below the skyline, avoiding crunching branches and exposed rock. It was like stalking prey, only the prey this time had body armor and comms. We reached the tunnel entrance by 1:40. The access door was still intact, though rusted along the lower edges. Claire produced a magnetic key she'd salvaged months earlier, hoping the locks hadn't been replaced. They hadn't. With a quiet whine, the mechanism disengaged. Inside, the tunnel stank of mildew and oil. The air was heavy, metallic. Water dripped somewhere deep in the dark. We advanced cautiously, beams aimed low to avoid detection from any vented light escaping outside. There were signs this space had been used. Scuff marks in the dust, boot prints, discarded MRE wrappers. But no people, no alarms. At the far end of the corridor, we reached the inner hatch, leading into the base of the tower itself. That's when I saw it, a motion sensor, new, improvised, probably running off a proximity system patched into a portable controller. The beam was tight and someone had been clever, mounting it chest high to catch the unaware. But they'd made a mistake. The sensor casing was coated in dust, and the beam had a small reflective shimmer under infrared. We stepped over it. Beyond the hatch was the control room. I recognized the layout from years of training in communications protocols. Banks of rack-mounted servers, patchboards, a diesel backup generator now dormant. One wall was covered in ancient military schematics from a Cold War comms relay network. In the center of it all was the uplink terminal, a narrow steel desk with a flat console humming quietly, green LEDs still pulsing. It was alive. Somehow, after everything, it was still working. Claire got to work immediately. She connected her field drive, input the key sequence, and navigated the encrypted firmware in silence. I stood by the door, listening. No footsteps, no chatter. For 10 minutes, it was just the click of keystrokes and the occasional hum of the uplink cycling. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper. "It's in. Uploading. Don't talk." A bar began to crawl across the screen. Then I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard in years but recognized instantly. The metallic snap of a suppressed shot. One shot, then silence. Claire looked up, eyes wide. Anna had fired. I moved to the door and took a quick peek outside. The sky was pulsing faint blue with heat lightning, clouds rolling overhead. Then came shouting, male voices, quick and angry, coordinating. They weren't confused. They were reacting to protocol. They'd seen us. "Claire, how long?" I hissed. 70%, she said, breath tight. "Can you pull the drive and finish the sync remotely?" "No. If I interrupt the process, it'll corrupt. I need 2 more minutes." I slid behind the doorway, rifle up, and waited. Footsteps on the steel stairs. 2 of them. Quick, tactical movement. I clicked my safety off and steadied my breathing. Claire didn't look away from the screen. The first man breached with confidence, sweeping left, weapon high. He wore a coyote tan plate carrier with a green shemar, face partially covered. I let him pass me by 6 feet, then fired once. His body dropped instantly. The second man hesitated when he saw the first go down, just enough for me to duck and fire again. He took a round in the throat, stumbled, and fired blind into the ceiling before collapsing. Claire yelled, "Done!" I turned, and she unplugged the drive. The console beeped. Final packet transmitted. Move. We sprinted back through the tunnel, boots pounding the concrete. On the other side of the ridge, Anna opened up with suppressing fire. Rapid, precise, forcing the remaining thresholders to scatter into cover. We reached the tree line and ran north, moving fast over the wet slope toward Hammer's Point. 3 more gunshots cracked behind us. One zipped past my shoulder. Another thudded into a tree inches from Claire. We kept running. Anna met us halfway down the ravine. "They're reorganizing. You just lit a hornet's nest." We didn't stop moving until we were 2 miles past the site, soaked and breathless, crouched in the ruins of an old ATV trail shack. Claire cradled the data drive like it was a newborn. "They can take the mountain," Anna said, panting. "They can keep their freak cult and their tower, but the data's out." "Where did you route it?" I asked. Claire looked at me, her voice steadier than I expected. "All remaining nodes on the US emergency net, government, civilian, NATO fallback protocols. Any repeater or signal bridge still online, just got the files. So someone will see it," I said. "If anyone's left to listen." For the next 2 days, we went dark. No comms, no fires, no signals. We moved at night, crossed 2 rivers, and looped back west through the ruins of Stillwater, where an old NOAA station still blinked red in the fog. The world hadn't changed, but something in the air felt different. Then, on the 3rd night, as we sheltered in an abandoned train tunnel near the Colorado border, Claire's radio cracked to life. 3 short tones, then a 4th. An emergency broadcast override had been received. A voice came through. Female, tired but strong. "This is Emergency Relay Delta, transmitting from Site 6. We have received full sequence package. Medical logs, antigen data, and site clearance codes confirm. Repeat, we have the package. Survivors en route. You are not alone. The words echoed in the tunnel like a signal in a dream. For a moment, none of us moved. Claire held the radio close to her chest as if afraid the transmission might vanish if she breathed too hard. Anna leaned forward, eyebrows drawn, staring at the speaker like it might speak again. I just sat there, listening to the static that followed, faint and irregular, a whisper through deep time. Then the radio clicked again. This message will repeat every hour on the hour. Site 6 is active. Coordinates follow. 40.857 by -105.096. Secure perimeter. Green zone clearance for verified personnel. Mobile team inbound. Repeat. You are not alone. The frequency went quiet again. Claire looked up slowly, mouth parted slightly in disbelief. It worked, she said. They got it. Someone got it. I nodded, but my mind was already doing the calculations. The coordinates placed Site 6 somewhere near Pueblo, Colorado, just north of the old Comanche solar facility. It had likely been a National Guard fallback site, or perhaps one of the FEMA green zones built during the early outbreak. That meant 3 things: shelter, medicine, and maybe, just maybe, organized resistance. Anna stood and grabbed her rifle. That's 100 miles southwest, she said. We can't take open highways, not with thresholders on alert. We move at night, rest during the day. That gives us 4, maybe 5 days if the terrain holds. I checked our gear. 2 suppressed rifles, a sidearm, 1 suppressed .22 LR bolt-action rifle with a scope, 6 full mags, and a dwindling supply of dehydrated food and water tablets. The cold air of the tunnel clung to my skin. My muscles ached from the last push up the mountain, but we had momentum now, a real target, a signal in the dark. We set out at dusk. The southern plains opened before us like a canvas of ruin. Abandoned gas stations crumbling into weeds, rusting overpasses, empty farmland gone to seed. Civilization hadn't collapsed in flames here. It had just faded. The infected were sparse but present. Small groups roaming between structures, sometimes sleeping in tight circles like wolves. Their behavior remained inconsistent, sometimes slow and oblivious, sometimes erratic and violent with no clear trigger. Claire suspected neurological degeneration was accelerating by generation. Whatever the virus was, it wasn't stable. We avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. Even one scream could echo across miles. Anna led point most nights, eyes scanning for signs of tripwires or homemade traps. The thresholders had become more aggressive since Eagle Peak, broadcasting distorted radio loops across old CB bands, offering salvation to survivors in exchange for obedience. They were building something too, not a cure, a structure, a belief system. Somewhere along the way, they'd stopped seeing the infected as enemies. Now, they saw them as evolution. On the second night, we passed through what used to be Walsenburg. The town was completely gutted, ash and bone and soot beneath a blackened sky. We holed up in the ruins of a mechanic's shop, sleeping beneath a sun-faded lift bay while Anna stood watch. I caught barely 2 hours of rest before I heard something new. Distant rotors, not fast, not military, a slow, steady beat. Claire scrambled up beside me and peered through the broken window. In the distance, against the moonlit haze, we saw it. A rotary wing aircraft, an old MD-500E, circling low along I-25. Its belly was painted in orange and white, the tail stenciled with faded Department of Forestry markings. But the thing that caught our eyes was the spotlight. It wasn't searching, it was following. Beneath it, moving through the dark at a steady pace, was a group of perhaps 30 infected. They weren't wandering, they were marching, moving together with synchronized steps. Claire's voice was barely audible. "They're herding them," she whispered, "using light and noise." The helicopter circled once more and peeled away into the night. I didn't sleep after that. By the 4th day, we were halfway to Site 6. skirting along the edge of the Sangre de Cristo range, moving only when clouds blotted out the stars. That morning, we found a derailed freight train jackknifed across an old BNSF line. It had become a nest. Twisted metal and rotting canvas tarps concealing dozens of half-submerged bodies. We crept around it in silence, breathing through iodine-smeared gauze. Then, just outside Rye, we encountered something different. Smoke. Not the drifting haze of campfires or wreckage, but structured columns, 4 or 5 of them, rising from an old high school football field. We crept to a vantage point and stared through the lens. There were people, real people, dozens, tents arranged in military symmetry, children in patched clothing, solar panels tilted toward the sun, a perimeter manned by guards with bolt-action hunting rifles and scavenged uniforms. They weren't thresholders, they weren't infected, just survivors, and above it all, on the school's old scoreboard, they'd hung a hand-painted sign, Bakersfield South, Pop, 97, Stay Human. We watched for over an hour. Nobody looked sick. Nobody looked mad. But we didn't make contact. Claire wanted to stop. Anna voted against it. I agreed with Anna. It wasn't time yet. We left a small packet of supplies on the outskirts. Sealed meds, a spare radio battery, a half-full canteen, and marked it with a universal glyph for friendly passage. Then we moved on. Site 6 came into view just after dusk on the 6th day. It was smaller than I expected. 4 concrete buildings nestled into a bluff behind a perimeter of vehicle barricades and razor wire. A large white dish rotated slowly atop a central pylon, and floodlights cast a dim yellow cone across the open approach road. The northern gate had been reinforced with scrap steel and bore a visible security code pad. We waited in the tree line. At 19:30 hours, the gate opened. 2 figures stepped out, both armed but non-threatening. One was a man in his 50s, wearing an old NORAD jacket and a sidearm. The other was a woman, early 30s, in medical scrubs with a trauma kit slung across her shoulder. She stepped forward first, holding a scanner in one hand and a Geiger wand in the other. "Hold position," she called. "Scan in progress. 1 moment." The wand clicked faintly as she passed it over our clothing, faces, hands. Then the scanner beeped. Confirmed. Biologically clean. Weapons down. Eyes forward. We complied. Anna was the last to lower her rifle. Once inside the perimeter, the tension dropped slightly. The older man, Director J. Harper, as he introduced himself, led us into a command bunker lined with racks of surplus electronics and diesel backup stations. The moment Claire handed him the data drive, he moved to a sealed cabinet, inserted the cartridge, and began the authentication process. The system took it, no errors. The vaccine sequence had been verified. What followed was a blur. Blood tests, biometric scans, standard debrief. They separated us temporarily, confirming identity and intent. We were processed, catalogued, given temporary clearance bracelets, and assigned bunks inside a converted storage bay. For the first time in weeks, we slept under a real roof with running water. But it wasn't over. Harper met with us privately the following morning. He didn't sugarcoat anything. "We can't produce a global vaccine here," he said. "We don't have the labs. But your upload hit 3 other sites besides ours. One in Utah, one at Cheyenne Mountain, and one offshore. We've re-established a shortwave signal with the mountain. They're reactivating a biolab now." "Thresholders?" Anna asked. "They've expanded. New reports say they've taken over 4 repeater stations and 2 rail hubs. They're using the infected to build walls, herd tactics, like wolves, coordinated." Claire leaned forward. "Then we need to help, not just survive, fight." Harper studied us quietly for a long moment. Then he nodded. "There's a transport leaving for the mountain in 48 hours. If you're serious, pack light." And so here I sit, writing this from the debrief terminal of Site 6, watching the perimeter lights flicker as another storm rolls in over the bluffs. The infected still roam beyond the wire. The Thresholders still broadcast their twisted sermons from every hilltop they control. But now the signal is no longer theirs alone. Now we speak back, with code, with data, with resistance. We traveled through fire, silence, and blood to bring hope to this dying earth. And we are not alone anymore. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.